I first want to point out that like the 50 to 60 range in my starting pitcher rankings looks a lot like the 30 to 40 range for me, in that it's a big mess of pitchers that are hard to rank. Much more interesting pitchers than the glob was last. I guess you could call it a glob, but it's like a more attractive glob because it's mostly pitchers I like in that range. Every time I move a pitcher up, I'm having to push down a bunch of pitchers I also like. So, you know, this could all change a lot next week when we're talking about the starting pitchers. But I think Nick Lodolo's upside is so high that I have him in the top 30 now. Jack Flaherty, I've been high on him all along, and following that 14 strikeout effort yesterday, I got him up to 40. It's lower than I feel like it should be, but at the same time, putting Jack Flaherty 40th means he's ahead of Chris Bassett, who I'm holding out faith on, and it means he's ahead of Hunter Green and Ranger Suarez. It's like he's ahead of some good pitchers just getting him to 40. So that's as high as I was able to justify. Bryce Miller, Tanner Houck, and Reed Detmers, a few other risers from this year, are directly ahead of him just inside the top 40. So that's the range we're talking about for Jack Flaherty. Let's see. Stephen Kwan, I moved him up about 15 spots in both roto and head-to-head, which means he's like top 15 now in head-to-head because he was already so much higher there. Obviously the advantage of not striking out much, but now he's like top 30 in roto for me. And part of it's just there are so few outfielders to get excited about that I'm really hoping Kwan is able to sustain something like this. And there were reports in spring training that the Guardians encouraging him to swing harder. The exit velocity readings aren't really up, but like the barrel rate is up, and he's certainly, the impact is up. The expected stats are way up. And I thought he underperformed with batting average anyway last year. So I'm treating Stephen Kwan as a must-start outfielder now across the board. I guess high-end outfielder, I should say. He kind of already was must-start. Ryan Jeffers is now my 13th catcher. I've moved him ahead of preseason favorites Bo Naylor and Mitch Garver. Since Jeffers seems to be playing a lot more, and his strikeout rate is way down too. I'm not sure we mentioned that before. And then I'll end here with Jake Cronenworth, who hit a grand slam, I believe, here on Wednesday. And his production has been good, better than expected, but you look at the expected stats for him. I mean, XBA, X-Slug, X-Woba are all 90th percentile or better for Jake Cronenworth. So as good as he's been so far, it's possible he could be even better. And so I've moved him into my top 15 at second base in points leagues, and he's a bit lower in roto because I have guys like Ryan McMahon ahead of him. But I think he could continue to rise from there. I think we might be back to seeing Jake Cronenworth, valuing Jake Cronenworth not so differently than we did in, what was it? What was his great year? 2022, I believe it was.
Might have,
that sounds right.
It might have even been 21, but yeah, it was around there. And we haven't seen
2021. You're right, Frank. 2021.
Yeah,
he had 266 with 21 homers and an 800 OPS that year.
Yeah, and very clearly, I mean, the StatCast data is way up. The expected numbers look awesome for Jake Cronenworth so far. Great spot in the lineup, hitting there, clean up with the Padres. He's up to 24 RBI already, so that's a great number for Jake Cronenworth. I moved him up as well. You know, I came into today's podcast thinking, wow, you know, I'm really high on Stephen Kwan now. I moved him up to 25th now in the outfield rankings, and Scott's like, nope, 15th.
For points.
Right.
If we're talking roto, then I probably have him about that same. I have him 28th in roto, behind Colton Cowser and Tyler O'Neill.
I moved him up to Kwan up to 25th in head-to-head points, and I think he's in the low 30s, somewhere like that in roto. Chris, who were some risers for you?
Some risers for Chris. Salvador Perez, who has kind of steadily been rising for me, and he's only up to my number 6 catcher, so it's not like he hasn't jumped Yainer Diaz or Will Smith or any of those guys. But I think Salvador Perez kind of looks like the 2021, 2020 version of himself. And it's easier to buy into that when we've seen it from him before. I moved up Ryan Jeffers quite a bit as well. I think he is a top 15 catcher for me now? Something like that. Sorry, I don't want to get into it, but sometimes you make changes and then they don't get saved. But Ryan Jeffers is a top 15 catcher for me now. He is playing a lot of DH for the Twins. He's batting leadoff occasionally for them. Been very high in the lineup for the most part. So really like what we've seen from Ryan Jeffers so far. Willy Adames had a huge game or huge doubleheader today, a couple home runs, but he's been really good all season. Gunnar Henderson finally moved him into the top 20 overall. Joe Adela, big riser. Shode Managa, big riser for all the reasons we talked about. Jack Flaherty, Nick Lodolo. Reynaldo Lopez, I still have a lot of skepticism about, but I also moved him up significantly. I think he's top 20 at RP for me now.
Yeah, he's still only eligible at RP, unfortunately.
Yeah. Top 25.
He has SP now.
Oh, he just got it with yesterday's start. Yeah.
Yeah. So I moved him inside him. I moved him up to SP 64. So he's right in a similar range as Jordan Hicks and Renel Blanco for me.
Yeah, that all sounds about right. He's a little lower than Hicks for me, but similar range. And then
yeah, I'd agree.
Mason Miller is my number. Again, I don't think it's saved. He is my number 15 closer.
That's it. Oh man!
Wow!
I thought you were going to blow me out of the water.
Okay. I hate Mason Miller, I guess.
Oh my!
Sorry. I was looking. Hold on. I'm looking at head to head. He's probably higher.
I'm like, wait, am I the Mason Miller guy? Okay,
I put him 14th.
I might have went crazy. I put him 7th.
No, I don't think it's like I wrote.
Yeah.
So I have this rankings movers article I write after I update my rankings most every week, and I wrote in there. So Mason Miller entered my RP rankings for the first time, finally eligible there. I put him 14th behind Ryan Helsley and Alexis Diaz, but it feels kind of stupid saying it now. That's what I wrote, and I kind of think after the obvious, there's not like an obvious number 4 closer after Edwin Diaz, Josh Hader, and Emmanuel Clase. I think you could make the argument that Mason Miller is the best candidate to be that number 4 closer. I'm reluctant to do that because I don't think the A's are actually the 3rd place team they've been so far. So I think his save opportunities will be fewer and farther between. And there's still a pronounced injury history here. I know it came with him as a starter, but it's not like he's free from getting injured now that he's working in relief. So I'm reluctant to do that, to go that far with it for those reasons, but I don't think you're wrong to do it, Frank. I'm playing it a little safer.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say my top 7 at relief pitcher. Cole Reagans is a little bit different for obvious reasons, but then Edwin Diaz, Clase, Hader. I moved Yohan Duran back up to 5th. He's healthy, and that's basically where I had him before the season. Ryan Helsley, who's been amazing, and then Mason Miller. And I guess just a little behind the scenes, for my pitcher rankings, I lean heavily on K- walk rate and Sierra. So just to give you like, hey, what is Frank looking at when he's ranking pitchers? That's what I lean on most.
You've been much more heavy-handed with updating your relief pitcher rankings than I have, which I'm not saying like I've been neglecting my relief pitcher ranking. I've just been more cautious about making big moves this early in the season.
Fair enough. Chris, did you have anything else on RISERS?
I'm just trying to figure out whether it saved my rankings updates, and I'm maybe having a little bit of a meltdown because I can't tell if it did, and I don't know.
I feel for you, and I imagine you're seething on the inside right now.
I'm fine. It's funny to me, actually. I'm laughing.
You may have lost hours of work there.
It's fine. I think it saved. It just
okay
seems to have saved.
I hope so. I hope so.
I hope so too.
Right.
By the way, I moved Salvador Perez up to 4th in my catcher rankings because I think there's an obvious top 3 there. And after that, it's kind of like, you know, I have no favoritism for JT Realmuto anymore. And is Yainer Diaz definitively better than Salvador Perez? No. Yeah, I just think Perez this could be the second best version of Perez we've ever seen. And if it's not, and he regresses some, I don't think I'll be that wrong by having him 4th.
I wrestled with moving him ahead of JTR. I haven't done it yet, but I totally see the argument for doing that with Salvador Perez.